welcome into the CSN studios. I'm John Boruk filling in for Sebastian Salazar, and this is Real Fantasy, your place to position your fantasy team for the playoffs. It's the first week of the postseason in a lot of leagues out there, and we'll also hear from beat reporters from across the country with the latest tips and injury news. But first, let's say hello to our experts. Kay Adams joins us from the NFL Network, where you can watch her Monday through Friday mornings. You can also follow her on Twitter at Hey Kay Adams. And from NBC Sports and Roto World, Josh Norris. You can follow him on Twitter at, well, Josh Norris. All right, we kick things off with our quick hits. We spent a lot of the show last week talking about how bad the tight end position was. Well, week 13 was just heaven for all those in desperate need at the thinnest position in fantasy football. Ladarius Green with 110 yards and a score. How about Dwayne Allen? He only had 3 touchdowns in the first half, and Dennis Pitta found the end zone twice. Arizona's Jermaine Gresham also had a high target game against the Redskins. All of those performances really coming out of nowhere. So for owners who have been streaming tight ends all season long, Kay, can you trust any of these guys down the stretch?
Dwayne Allen was the #1 fantasy tight end, John, so of course you want to start him, but you can't because he did all of that damage on 4 targets. And you know who else got 4 targets in that game? Jack Doyle. They've got the Texans. That's the second toughest matchup for tight ends in the game. Please avoid Dwayne Allen. Save yourself some trouble and pick up a guy like Cameron Brate. Another guy that you mentioned is Dennis Pitta. And sure, we were all excited for those 2 touchdowns. It's the first time he scored 2 touchdowns in a game since 2012. The first time he scored a single touchdown since way back in 2013. You cannot chase those fantasy points. I know that Joe Flacco plays better football in December, and I know that he's BFFs with Dennis Pitta, but they're going up to New England. I don't like it.
Yeah, 1,092 days between touchdowns for Dennis Pitta, as you said, dating back to 2013. And since you mentioned the negative ones, Kay, I get to put a positive spin on it. And that's why I'm going to mention Ladarius Green. I mean, now he has the Buffalo Bills, a team that allows 10 yards per target on average this season, which is absolutely the worst in the NFL. And we talk about the Steelers' offense. They only have 2 mouths to feed, right? It's Le'Veon Bell, it's Antonio Brown, and now a third target in Ladarius Green over the middle of the field. It's not like he's just some unknown name, right? This is their priority free agent of the offseason who missed time with a head injury. And now that he's in the fold, I think this is a multi-dimensional offense. And I do quickly want to mention Jermaine Gresham, right? He's finally someone we have to take seriously. 10-plus points in 3 straight games. It's David Johnson, it's Larry Fitzgerald, and now it's Jermaine Gresham. And he faces the Miami Dolphins, the team that allowed that 2-touchdown performance to Dennis Pitta. So I think Jermaine Gresham should be a bit more on the radar than he actually is.
Tight ends are like penny stocks. You don't want to fall in love with them at all. You got to know when to get in, and you better know when to get out, because if you fall in love with a tight end, it's going to wind up burning you. I agree with you on Ladarius Green. In fact, look at the body of work in a short amount of time. This guy already has 4 receptions, over 30 yards. So even if the volume isn't there, he can still put up quite a bit of yards on just a few catches alone. So I'd like Ladarius Green for Pittsburgh moving forward. All right, moving on. Week 14 could be a tricky weekend for some of the game's best offenses. The Packers host Seattle's Legion of Boom, but without Earl Thomas. DeMarco Murray and the Titans have to face Denver, and LeGarrette Blount's Patriots take on the league's #1 ranked defense in the Baltimore Ravens, who always seem to play New England tough. So Green Bay, New England, Mariota, and Murray in Tennessee, a lot of reliable fantasy players may have some tough sledding here in Week 14. So, Josh, what concerns do you have?
Yeah, and I'm going to look at that Tennessee versus Denver game. Let's put it that way. Look, DeMarco Murray's a must-play. This Denver defense is not a balanced one. They are exceptional against the pass, allowing on average only 107 receiving yards to wide receivers. But DeMarco Murray's just absolutely going to feast on the defense, run all over them. And I actually like Delaney Walker. I really do. I mean, Brandon Marshall, he's up in the air for this game. And I think if Marcus Mariota, who was quarterback 15 against the Vikings, and this is kind of a similar matchup, if he's going to pass it to anyone, I think it's Delaney Walker in the middle of the field, Kay.
Ravens looking good. It's getting colder. We know what Joe Flacco can do. They rise to the occasion. I want to talk about that Baltimore-New England game because they do get to Tom Brady, as John said, and give him a hard time. He has 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, the 10 times that he's faced in. He's got a passer rating in the mid-70s. That is not the Tom Brady that we know and love, and he doesn't have Gronk. But guess what? You're playing him because it's week 14, and if you can bench him, I think that is a wild, outrageous thing to do. I'll give you not a sleeper, but a must-start in this and a must-sit, and the must-start is Malcolm Mitchell. I love this kid. 3 touchdowns in 3 games. He's got the respect, the eyes of one Tom Brady, especially when it counts. He's an outside threat. We saw him get past Darrelle Revis a couple of weeks ago. Just incredible what he has been able to do. So he is a lock for me. The guy I think you must sit. We're talking about tight ends a lot. People keep trying to make Martellus Bennett happen. I'll be honest, in the offseason and training camp, I was one of those people. He was developing chemistry. We were hearing glowing reports out of Comcast New England. Everyone was saying that the rapport was there, but he had 4 targets last week. He's not Gronk. He's not even playing that role. This is the toughest matchup, by the way, against Baltimore. They're allowing the fewest points to the tight end spot. No bueno. Do not play Martellus Bennett. Don't even think about it. Take any of the tight ends that we talked about earlier and play them instead.
All right, and finally, time to look for some under-the-radar plays as well as some players who the projections might like a little too much. Matt Forte and Brandon Marshall are ranked in the top 10 at their position this week. Probably too high with now Bryce Petty starting the final 4 games, while Tim Hightower is projected as the 26th best running back this week, which might seem a little low against Tampa's defense. Okay, let's start with you. Looking at the FanDuel pricing and Roto-World projections, who do you think is a little too low this week?
Carson Palmer gets no respect, and in the beginning of the season, he didn't deserve it, but he's averaging over 300 yards over the past 6 games. I like that. He's found a new target in Jermaine Gresham, the aforementioned tight end. You saw what Joe Flacco did to the Dolphins last week. 381 yards, 4 touchdowns. Carson Palmer is going to have himself a day against Miami.
All right, Josh, same question to you. You're looking at quarterback as well here?
Yeah, and this is a rare feat in week 14 of the season, but I'm looking at Kirk Cousins at the Philadelphia Eagles. Quarterback 17 in FanDuel pricing. That's absolutely an underrated Kirk Cousins right now. I mean, they're averaging 420 yards of offense on the road. He has been a quarterback 9 or better in 5 of 6 games this season. And here's a stat for you. Philadelphia allows the most passes completed 20-plus yards down the field, and Kirk Cousins is 3rd on that list. So finally, week 14, I sing the praises of Kirk Cousins here.
How about a player that is projected too high in week 14?
I don't know why we keep talking about tight ends today, but you mentioned Delaney Walker, Josh, and I happen to think he's overvalued in daily fantasy. If you drafted him and you want to play him, that's fine. But there really are so many options at tight end. I love to that's where I find the most value in setting a DFS lineup. You have Delaney Walker. Sure, he's a top 5 fantasy tight end all season, but he's going up against the Broncos. Over the past 5 weeks, they're the 2nd toughest matchup for tight ends. You basically know Ladarius Green is going to outscore Delaney Walker in fantasy points, and he's much cheaper on daily fantasy sites. So why would you not make that move? Don't overspend for the big name.
I agree. Josh, we'll wrap it up with you. A player you think that the projections might have a little overrated.
Yeah, Doug Martin against the New Orleans Saints at running back 11. Kay, remember just a few weeks ago when we decided you need to go out and go get Doug Martin because he has the New Orleans Saints twice in the fantasy playoffs? Yeah,
I remember those days.
Maybe not such a good take because the New Orleans Saints have turned it around since week 8. In fact, they're the 5th best rushing defense in that span. And on the road, they allow the fewest rushing yards in terms of 71 in the league. Look, Doug Martin is now splitting time with Jacquizz Rodgers, who have an expanded role according to the coaching staff, and Charles Sims is fast approaching in terms of some targets and maybe some touches. So again, Doug Martin as a top 12 running back 11 on FanDuel's pricing. I think that's far too high.
I'm going to go quarterback here. On FanDuel, you've got Drew Brees, Tom Brady. You know who's number 3 on that list? How about Matthew Stafford? He has one 300-yard game in his last 9 games and 7 touchdown passes in his last 6. Very pedestrian stats for a quarterback. Look, I know they're at home. They got the Chicago Bears, but how many passing yards did the Bears allow to Colin Kaepernick? What was that, Josh, last week?
4.
Oh, it was like 20 or something like that.
4 passing yards. The Chicago Bears defensively are not as bad as most people think.
Already.
But 8,500 for Matthew Stafford. I like where you guys are headed with Carson Palmer and Kirk Cousins. So overrated, Matthew Stafford. All right, we're off to a great start. We'll check in with you again over in our Facebook Live. But now it's time to go around the league, and we'll start in Baltimore as the Ravens offense is clicking on all cylinders. At least they were last week. And Brashad Perriman is starting to find the end zone. Will that trend continue? Clifton Brown of CSN Mid-Atlantic starts our cheat sheet.
If you're looking for some late season fantasy help, Ravens wide receiver Brashad Perriman might be somebody to watch. I still don't think Perriman's going to get a lot of targets, but when he does get opportunities, he's capable of making big plays. Perriman has shown his ability to get to the end zone, even if he's running a short route. So if Perriman is a guy you think could make the difference for you as maybe a third or fourth wide receiver in your league, you might want to jump on him in these last few games.
And in fantasy, you need a sure thing. The Packers offense has been a very safe bet each and every week. But as your team enters the playoffs, Green Bay plays host to Seattle's lights-out defense. Can you count on your Packers in Week 14? Charlie Sakaitis of NBC 26 in Green Bay has more.
If you're looking for a little consistency out of the Green Bay offense, then Jordy Nelson is the place to go. Jordy has hauled in 10 touchdowns this year and only seems to be getting stronger the further away we get from that ACL injury a season ago. Nelson had 8 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown in the snow against Houston. It's supposed to snow again this Sunday. If you want a dark horse option, maybe try out Jared Cook. Mike McCarthy, the coach, loves to talk about attacking the middle of the field. With Earl Thomas gone, Green Bay may try just that with their big tight end.
And finally, let's head to Dallas. The Cowboys are just 2 wins away from clinching home field advantage in the NFC. So they could start resting some of their players, including Ricky Sensation Ezekiel Elliott. Should you add Alfred Morris? Emmy winner Newy Scruggs of NBC5 in Dallas has the latest on the Cowboys' backfield.
If you have Ezekiel Elliott on your fantasy roster, you're okay. The Cowboys do not plan to rest him down the stretch if they get home field advantage and whenever they win the NFC East Division. Jerry Jones said so on his radio show on Tuesday. Here's the thing. He's going to get his 20 carries. They're going to make sure that they go into the playoffs streaking well. Now, that final game against Philadelphia, don't know. Maybe Alfred Morris will get some carries. But I'll tell you what, against the Giants, Tampa Bay, and then that Monday night game against Detroit on December 26th, I expect Ezekiel Elliott to get a heavy workload. So if you've got him on your fantasy team, I don't think you really need to pick up Alfred Morris at all.
Next up, we go face-to-face with you on Facebook as we tackle your questions. Kay Adams and Josh Norris, 2 of the best in the biz, are at your disposal every week. Their advice is straight ahead. And you just heard Kay talk about Carson Palmer, and he's being undervalued this week. Will she put her money where her mouth is when it comes to daily fantasy? Find out next. And welcome back to Real Fantasy. Every Thursday at 2:45 Eastern Time, Kay Adams, Josh Norris, and I will take all your lineup, trade, and waiver wire questions live on Facebook. How do you join us? Just like your local CSN Facebook page, and then make sure to log in on every Thursday afternoon. Here are the best questions from this week. Josh, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Pierre Garçon, Malcolm Mitchell, or Terrell Williams for that third wide receiver spot?
Of those, I would go Tyrell Williams. Now, he'll most likely match up against James Bradbury, who we've talked about in the show many times, and I think he's one of the best young corners in the league. But I still think you go him, and then I would go Malcolm Mitchell, and then I would go Pierre Garçon.
Malcolm Mitchell clearly has the trust of Tom Brady. He's got 3 touchdowns in 3 games. He's looking at him, and he's this outside threat that he doesn't have. No Gronk, no Danny Amendola. So I think that he certainly will keep those targets. Will continue. Well, no matter what you do, you have to play Tyrell Williams up against the Panthers. He's got touchdowns in 4 straight games. He's averaging 9 targets a game. He's averaging 77 yards a game in that span as well. And the Panthers, they're just bleeding points to wide receivers. They're allowing the 3rd most to the position all year long. So you have to exploit that matchup and make it to the next round.
Go with Big Ben Roethlisberger on the road in Buffalo, or you got Dak Prescott. Now, I have learned over the course of this season to steer clear of Ben Roethlisberger when he is on the road, because it has just been it's been a nightmare to watch. I was there at the game in Philadelphia when they completely annihilated that Steelers offense earlier in the season. Dak Prescott has a very high floor. You know what you're going to get from Dak Prescott. So I'm going to take what Dak Prescott has done. You can essentially know that you're going to get 2 touchdowns, whether it's 1 rushing, 1 passing, 2 passing. You know what you're going to get from Dak Prescott. I think he's the safer play. Here's another PPR flex. Thomas Rawls, Terrell Williams, Brandon LaFell.
Oh, yeah.
And they have Phillip Rivers. So something to consider.
I like Brandon LaFell, and I think I talked about him a couple of weeks ago on the show. He's dealing with a bit of an injury, but this is a guy who plays on over 90% of the snaps. He's got Andy Dalton. You know that guy who wanted to use the draft pick on, or the waiver pick on Eli Manning? He should go with Dalton this week. Dalton's a great streaming option this week. I know he doesn't have A.J. Green. I know maybe last week was a fluke, but I think Andy Dalton is going to be a more than serviceable quarterback if he had a guy like Mariota in a tougher matchup.
Yeah, and to answer this question, I still play Tyrell Williams over all these. In fact, Kay, I'm kind of puzzled why people are still wondering about Tyrell Williams. Like, by now, he is a wide receiver too. Like, he's firmly entrenched in your lineup.
It's the consistency. It's that he had a 100-yard game and then nothing. When people don't realize that he had two games against the Broncos there. You can say what you want.
Exactly.
They eliminate wide receivers. So it was up and down, a bit of a roller coaster there, and people sort of steered away. In a good matchup, you play Tyrell Williams.
All right, coming up on Real Fantasy, our experts will be back to help you fill in your daily lineup. Josh has his eye on Doug Baldwin and Julian Edelman in Week 14, and he'll tell you why. And welcome back to Real Fantasy. Time now to lock in on those tough daily choices with our fantasy formula. We've checked the values, the matchups, the players under the radar. We're now going to help you put together the best daily team possible here in Week 14. But first, we got to check out last week's results. Why not? And the winner for the second straight week was, he's smiling, Josh Norris. He rode David Johnson, Jordan Howard, and Golden Tate to a very comfortable win, his fifth of the season. Before departing, Sebastian put up a respectable second-place finish, but he had way too many Saints on his roster, and who could we see that coming? You know, Drew Brees didn't throw a touchdown pass. And Kay, I guess you should not have relied so much on the Redskins defense or Mike Evans.
Surprise.
Mike Evans, come on.
I thought that was a shoo-in for sure. All right. I'm going to fill in for Sebastian. So, Josh, you have a one-game lead over Kay and the host position with 2 weeks remaining.
Yes,
one more win. It'll give you the title. So, Kay, we cannot let that happen.
John, you are too savvy to let that happen. We've got this.
I'm
He's not
hoping.
getting another win this season. You hear that?
Let's
Norris,
do it.
Put those medals away.
That's right. All right, let's get to it. Here is the team that Josh is hoping clinches his daily fantasy crown. Andrew Luck at quarterback, David Johnson and DeMarco Murray. He believes in Murray against Denver, right?
Oh, I absolutely do. It's an awesome matchup. Broncos are horrible against the run.
Now you got Doug Baldwin, Julian Edelman, and Golden Tate at wideout, and C.J. Fedorowicz again at tight end. All right,
Kay's guy.
As for Kay, you're taking both Melvin Gordon and Terrell Williams of San Diego. Might be a little risky with the Chargers flying across the country for that early start in Carolina, Kay.
No, absolutely not. Carolina loves to just gift wrap fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. He is a top target of Phillip Rivers.
Carson Palmer's your quarterback. Odell Beckham and Tyler Lockett round out the receivers, and Cameron Brate at tight end. And here is how my team shakes out. Big money on the most expensive back and receiver, David Johnson and Mike Evans. Also Kirk Cousins, underpriced, and Melvin Gordon. He gets it done running and receiving. So I'm trying to find some bargains. So where do I go? I'm going Vance McDonald at home against the Jets.
Wow.
And how about Ted Ginn Jr.? He's got a touchdown in 3 straight games.
I love that.
So there's my bargain plays to kind of round out the lineup. That's fine. You're not gonna like it even more when it beats yours this upcoming week.
Coming strong on day
Shots
one.
fired.
All right. We start with the defending champ. Josh, you spent big on quarterback and running back, so you saved a little money with Doug Baldwin and Julian Edelman. Both of those games expected to be played in the snow. How confident are you with Baldwin in the cold in Wisconsin in December?
Yeah, and first, Edelman's a shoo-in, right? He averages 13 targets over the last 3 games, so you absolutely have to plug him in at his price. Doug Baldwin, look, 6+ receptions in 5 of his last 6 games, and the Packers are giving a lot of points to slot receivers. And when we talk about weather, which you asked about, it's an important topic, right? A lot of people, especially last week after Colin Kaepernick's game, are really worried about snow games, when really they should be worried about games with a high wind factor. And so that's something to monitor heading up until these games, until Sunday. If the winds reach 25, 30 miles per hour, I'll get a bit nervous. But as of right now, if it's just snow, I'm perfectly cool with playing both these wide receivers.
All right, and Kay, you told us that you think Odell Beckham is the steal of the week against the Cowboys. Now, usually you don't hear that being said about Beckham, so why is that?
He's not so much a steal, but he kind of is. People, I think, will steer clear of him because of the way Eli Manning and this offense is operated. But this is a must-win game. I'm going to use narrative. They're at home. This is a guy who had 16 targets a week ago. This is a guy who has 5 touchdowns in 5 games. It's Odell Beckham Jr. He's going to go wild this week and get you a win, I promise.
All right. Now, here's what I did. Here's my receivers. I told you about Jordy Nelson. He's almost good for 90 yards and a touchdown. Will he get it against the Seattle Seahawks? Look, I think he's going to have double-digit targets. So that's why and it's a little different since I'm going up against you two. I look at this as a 50-50 as opposed to a GPP in a big tournament. We're talking about the Colin Kaepernick. So Jordy Nelson is about as good of a cash play as you're going to find. So what do you think about Ted Ginn Jr., though, as a real sleeper this week at 4,700?
To me, John, like you're facing off against 2 of the best corners in the league, right? You have Jordy Nelson against Richard Sherman, and now you have Ted Ginn against Casey Hayward. Those are matchups that I don't want to go up against at all.
He's got he's got touchdowns in 3 straight. And in bad games, in tough matchups. So I like that. I actually really like it this week.
140-yard touchdown, he meets value. That's at 4,700, that's all you need. All right, hopefully our experts helped you with your daily lineup. Before we go, let's take a look at our crystal ball. All right, let's start with the best streaming quarterback option, and let's start with Kay.
I'm going to go with Andy Dalton. He carved up the Eagles last week, and now he's got the Browns. No A.J. Green, but he made Brandon LaFell look great. He's getting it done, or he got it done last week. And against the Browns, they allowed the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. A perfect pickup, perfect stream.
Yeah, Kay, I agree that Dalton's the first streamer, but the second one, and you're going to think I'm crazy, it's still Colin Kaepernick. Again, he's going up against the New York Jets, a team that allowed 41 on Monday night, allowed 28 a few weeks ago to the Cleveland Browns. Look, as long as Colin Kaepernick doesn't get benched mid-game, I think he still has a chance to put up 20-plus points in this contest.
Josh, I have to go with Kaepernick in one league because my other guy is Blake Bortles. So Kaepernick it is.
Yeah. Kaepernick for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, earlier in the show, you said that Doug Martin was projected to be a little too high. Looks like Charles Sims could be coming off injured reserve, and if he's active, could he steal some touches this week? Over under 10 touches for Sims.
Oh, I think well under for Charles Sims, but I could see maybe 2 or 4 receptions. I think he'll be using the receiving game more. If he's going to lose carries, Doug Martin that is, I think it's going to be Jacquizz Rodgers.
All right, that's going to do it for Real Fantasy. Join us every Thursday around 2:45 for Facebook Live. Get your questions into the experts. For Kay Adams and Josh Norris, I'm John Boruk. Thanks for watching, and good luck in Week 14.